is going to be executed on a pyre, I believe.
The Iroquois, I guess that is.
Yeah. So they've
Mohawks.
They've taken this gentleman as a prisoner of war, and they're executing him by immolation. So they're setting him on fire. And I think it's Daniel Day-Lewis's character or another character sees him in the scope of his rifle and shoots him to put him out of his misery.
Right.
And so the question I received was, is it wrong to do this?
Right.
And so what the person said to me is, I don't think this is assisted suicide, but is it? Can we justify this? And then what about other parallel cases where people take actions that seem to result in their death but don't seem like suicide, like somebody jumping out of the World Trade Center when it's collapsing or on fire?
Right.
And so the point of my reply was, well, in the case from Last of the Mohicans, that seems clear to me. It's an example of assisted suicide, that the point here is to end someone's life as quickly as possible in order to reduce the suffering that they are undergoing. And so I cautioned this gentleman, said that we have to be careful about our intuitions and feelings in these matters, because if you say that circumstance is okay, then wouldn't it be justified for a doctor to prescribe a terminally ill patient with stage 4 bone cancer a poison or a drug they take to end their own life? They're also undergoing pain. The person dying of a very painful cancer may undergo more pain in a total sense than that character in Last of the Mohicans, who will be immolated for a few minutes. What about someone who's going to be suffering from cancer for months and months?
Yes.
If you justify it in the Mohicans case, then it seems that in any other kind of assisted suicide case, you would end up justifying it, and that would be wrong. However, I believe there are many cases, however, where someone will take a course of action under the principle of double effect. And while they foresee that they will die, it's not something that they intend. Yeah, they don't intend it. And so I say there, like in the case of the World Trade Center, we're not saying, that these people are choosing death. They're just choosing, hopefully, a way to get out of a dangerous situation, knowing that they probably won't live. And of course, you can't make the greatest decision under circumstances
it's
like
hard
that.
to say they have the fullness of their presence of mind when a skyscraper is collapsing to the ground.
Sure. Or another example in war, let's go back to movies. Go back to Captain America, First Avenger. Excellent movie that I would
say. I have not seen.
Well, so there is a scene in the beginning where Captain America, Steve Rogers, before he becomes the super soldier, he goes to basic training, and a test. They're trying to find the best soldier to turn into the super soldier for America. They don't want the biggest guy. They want the guy with the biggest heart. The guy with the best virtue. So they see all these guys, and they see this little guy, Steve Rogers, and they think, what's this guy going to do? And so Tommy Lee Jones plays excellent lieutenant in the film. He takes what looks like a grenade, and he says, "Grenade!" And he throws it, and everyone scatters, and Rogers jumps on it and tells everyone to get away. Now, suppose that were a real grenade.
Right.
The soldier jumps on the grenade and saves his platoon buddies. Is it suicide? No.
Right.
Because his intent is not to die. If he were to somehow live, he would say, oh, that's fine and dandy. I'd imagine a World War II vet would say something like that.
Right.
His intent is to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. He merely foresees he probably won't make it out of there alive. So it's these fine moral principles we have to take into account when we're talking about these issues that come up in sometimes complex situations.
Foresee but not intend. I'm sure that'll come up again in the course of the next 2 hours. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. What Catholic teaching do you reject? Is it perhaps the Church's teaching on contraception or divorce or monogamy? The Church, in fact, says one wife, right? Maybe there's someone who rejects that teaching.
Jesus says you cannot serve more than one master.
See? I knew you'd have an explanation for it, Trent. 888-318-7884. Shall we try to get one call in before the break?
This maybe we should let it reset so we have time to unspool.
All right, very good. Well, then I will say this. How would you like to be able to answer questions about Catholic moral teaching the way Trent Horn does, or the way he's about to? The good news, you can, if you have the right tools. And one thing that Catholic Answers has put together here is our School of Apologetics. And Trent has an entire course called Moral Apologetics, covering a lot of the same territory we're going to cover in the next 2 hours, that will equip you to answer moral questions and defend the moral teachings of the Catholic Church. Here's what one student had to say. It's simply laid out and logical. It's a program that can be digested in small chunks. The regular use of examples helps one understand how Catholic moral teaching is applied in various situations. The best thing is I help myself remember by trying to explain to my kids what I have learned. Trent, you're helping a father be a father there.
Mm-hmm.
I like Trent Horn, very knowledgeable and presents information in an understandable way, just simply fantastic. So, great way to spend your summer building up your apologetic muscles. Visit schoolofapologetics.com today, right back after this.
Catholic Answers Live with Trent Horn is coming right back.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
There's all kinds of prayers. There's all kinds of ways of praying. There's all kinds of methods of praying. There's a Salesian method, and Francis de Sales and Ignatius of Loyola. There's Franciscan methods and Dominican methods, and you name it, we got it. But sometimes we depend on a method too much. St. Teresa said that prayer was conversation with God. Do you have a hard time conversing with people? No, I don't have a hard time. Well, that's how it is with God.
888-318-7884, 888-31 Truth. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. The show is Catholic Answers Live. My guest, Trent Horn. The topic for the next 2 hours: which Catholic moral teaching do you reject? Trent, it looks like some members of the Supreme Court of the United States reject some Catholic moral teaching. In fact, probably more than one. But alas, recently we've learned now another blow against human life. This recently handed out decision concerning the case in Louisiana.
Yeah, there was the case that was brought to the Supreme Court dealt with a Louisiana law that was almost identical to a Texas law that came before the court recently, about 4 years ago. And this law dealt with whether abortion facilities could be required to have doctors have hospital admitting privileges to a nearby hospital within a 30-mile radius, which is something that is usually required for any kind of outpatient surgery facility. So in 2016, the court struck down. What's interesting about this case is that in the case that was recently just decided, it was a 5-4 decision where the court was split on this, that struck down Louisiana's law requiring admitting privileges, saying that it would create an undue burden on women seeking an abortion. But this goes back to the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case in 1992 that really didn't change abortion legislation per se, but gave this principle. So it scrapped Roe's trimester system and said, look, the state can legislate abortion as long as it doesn't put an undue burden on a woman's ability to have an abortion. So that's what they said in Casey, and that's been applied ever since. In 2016, in the Texas ruling, the court said requiring hospital admitting privileges could close a fair number of abortion facilities and take them out of women's reach, undue burden. Here's what's interesting, though, about the case, Chris, is in that case, Roberts was the split vote, the deciding vote here in the recent case, in the Louisiana case. And he sided with the liberal justices as if they were two distinct sets, which I'm starting to doubt more recently.
Right.
That he sided with them, saying that no, that this creates an undue burden. What's strange about it is that in 2016, Roberts dissented against the Texas ruling that struck down the admitting privileges requirement. So in 2016, he sided with saying that the requirement was not burdensome, but now in 2020, Roberts says that it is burdensome. And so it seems like the only reason he is doing that is because what he said in his what he put forward as his reasoning was a legal principle called stare decisis. I think the full term is stare decisis et quietum non movere, which means essentially do not disturb that which is decided. So the court has this principle basically that, look, when we decide a case, you're not supposed to just at the drop of a hat overturn it unless you have a really good reason for doing so.
How about that it was bad law to begin with?
Well, that's right, but that's what's odd is that if the principle of stare decisis is applied, which says you have to go with how you previously decided, Roberts is saying if you're going to apply it to him, then Roberts should just go with what he previously decided. So he said we shouldn't go against what we decided. If it's individually him, he should go with the same thing he did 4 years ago.
There's another element of the hypocrisy from the pro-death side here that is revealed, and that is that if abortion truly is about women's health care, then the advocates for abortion would want for doctors to have admitting privileges, because they would want the best doctors who had the admitting who were regarded as good doctors by other hospitals and had these admitting privileges, and if something went wrong, then the woman's health could be protected in the course of the abortion. But in fact, that is not their chief concern.
Well, the fact of the matter is that they are trying to protect the bottom of the barrel who goes out into this industry. I'm sorry, when you've resorted to ending the lives of small human beings in the world for money.
You're not a doctor. Yeah.
No, you're not. You're as much a doctor as Joseph Mengele was a doctor
Right.
in the Nazi concentration camps.
Right.
So you are not the best. You are at the bottom of the barrel. And they will bend over backwards to defend individuals involved in this and protect them from any hint of scandal whatsoever. And that is what we see here, that many complicit individuals, you look at Dr. Kermit Gosnell, for example, in Pennsylvania.
This is a horror story.
The House of Horrors. He probably America's most prolific serial killer based on the number of born alive infants that he probably killed, which we still to this day don't know how many there were. And he was protected because at that time, it was in Pennsylvania, I believe, I think it was Ridge. I think it was Tom Ridge was the governor. Ridge or Wolf. I want to say Ridge.
Tom Ridge sounds right.
Yeah, Tom Ridge. He was the governor, and he's pro-choice. And the state moved to. The only reason that Gosnell was brought down was not because of his health, the violations of at his health clinic. It was violations against prescribing drugs illicitly.
Yes,
it's kind of like how they brought down Al Capone on tax evasion. And so, but that's what you see. And I've been there before, Chris. I've seen this on the local level of pro-life advocates who have tried to file complaints against abortion providers, for ambulances going in and out of their places routinely, and the local governments turn a blind eye if they are full of pro-choice politicians, which is why when you vote, even especially at the local level, it's important to vote for people who believe all people are people.
Yeah.
That should be a very simple statement. Who should I vote for? Start by voting for people. Only vote for people who think people are people.
Yes.
If they think some people are not people,
don't vote for them.
I don't trust them.
Yeah.
I don't see what's wrong with that as a principle.
It is a good one. Maybe someone will call and object to your to your voting principles, Trent. 888-318-7884. What Catholic moral teaching do you reject? Let's go to Sean in Fort Perry, Canada, listening on Alexa. Sean, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Trent. I need to say, Trent, that what I really respect about you, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, and the reason I'm asking you this question, and I'm kind of afraid to ask anybody else, is I know you won't agree with what I'm about to say, but the way that you respond is so compassionate that people feel when they're listening to you. I know that, okay, I disagree with what he just said, but I really respect him.
High praise. Thank you for that, Sean.
Well, thanks, Sean. So how can I help you?
It's the truth. What I find really disingenuous about the Catholic Church is its contradictory attitude toward gay people. Out of one side of its mouth, it says everybody should be respected and loved and so forth, and that includes gay people, but out of the other side of its mouth, it says they shouldn't have sex, and if they want to get married and have a committed relationship, they can't do that either. The Catholic Church will support the right of black people to be treated with equality and dignity, but not gay people, and yet nobody chooses to be black, and nobody chooses to be gay, but there's that dichotomy, which to me is a genuine abuse of the whole idea of the essential equality of all people. And I mean, you've just been talking about aborting people, how disrespectful that is and how unjust that is. But one wonders if there was some kind of test to discern before somebody was born that they were going to be gay. Would it be all right with the Catholic Church that they get aborted?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, Sean, let's see if Trent can't help us through this.
Sure, Sean. And first, I'll answer that last point, that it would be absolutely wrong to abort someone because they have a particular kind of sexual orientation. I remember, actually, I was in a debate once with Malcolm Potts, a well-known embryologist who defends legal abortion. And there was an awkward moment in the debate where they asked us about whether abortion was wrong in the case of Down syndrome. And I said it was absolutely wrong, and to argue for it in the presence of anyone who has Down syndrome would be a horribly offensive thing, I would imagine. And my opponent, Dr. Potts, tried to say, well, of course, people with Down syndrome are fully valuable and they're wonderful, in the community, but at the same time, women should have a right to choose. Yeah, but it came off quite disingenuous there. So I see where you're coming from. So let's look at the terms that are involved. It sounds like you're saying that we have people who have a particular kind of sexual orientation or desire, and we ought to treat them with justice and not discriminate against them. So I full-heartedly agree with that, and the Catholic Church does agree with that. Where I think we're going to disagree is probably about when it comes to the issue of sexual morality, like what we do sexually matters. So to find common ground, for example, there was a case in Washington, D.C., about 30 years ago during the AIDS crisis. And there was a Catholic convent that had opened up that was providing hospice care for men who were dying of AIDS. And I think this was actually, they might have been the Sisters of Charity, actually, Mother Teresa's nuns. And there were people in the community who were protesting this, because especially back then, people didn't know if how you could transmit AIDS, how transmittable was it, is this bad for the community? And the church and the nuns stood fast and said that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. So denying someone medical care to treat them of a disease just because they have a certain sexual orientation, saying that it's okay to end their life or to kill them or commit violence against them. These are all very wrong. Even if you took someone who had, this is their sexual orientation, it were discovered, that shouldn't matter what how you feel. That shouldn't matter what your attractions are. That's a subjective part of ourselves. But Sean, I think where we might disagree though is in the realm of sexual behavior. Because I think that who we choose to have sex with or what we choose to do with our sexual parts is morally relevant in a way that skin color is not. What do you think of that as a basic principle, that who we choose to have sex with or what we choose to do sexually can have very grave moral implications?
Well, the part that I don't understand is heterosexual people can get married and have sex. Gay people are supposed to, every single one of them are supposed to be celibate, period. They can't get married, they can't have sex. That's not even realistic.
Sure. Well, Sean, let me parse this correctly. They are free to marry if by marriage you mean engage in a lifelong union with a person of the opposite sex, though that may not be recommended for someone who has a deep-seated same-sex attraction. I think where it'll be difficult here is that the words sex and marriage, when you and I use them, might have very different meanings involved in them. And I think sometimes when people have these conversations about why doesn't the church let gay people do X, it's because the words sex and marriage, they get used in different ways. So for me, the word sex, what that refers to is the life-giving union that can only exist between a man and a woman. That's what the sexual act is. Like when you try to define sex, it starts to get hard if you, I apologize for the pun there, and very unintentional, of course. It becomes difficult to distinguish certain kinds of sexual behavior from the sexual act. And for example, distinguishing the sexual act from what other people would call mutual masturbation, for example. Or take marriage. So let's take that we're defining what marriage is. I would hold that marriage is a very specific definition. Marriage is the lifelong union of one man and one woman. But how would you define those terms? You see how you might define them differently and be hard for us to find common ground on them?
Well, I think so, because I believe that it's possible for two people of the same gender to have a loving, committed, monogamous relationship. And the Catholic Church does say that the expression of the sexual act between two married people, in a loving way, in a way that each one is fully giving to the other one, is as important to the marriage as the procreation of children. And even St. Paul says about marriage, it's better to marry than to burn. But again, the Catholic Church denies that opportunity to two people of the same gender who love each other, want to live together in a committed relationship.
Well, what I would say, Sean, is that two people are free to live together if they're of the same gender. People can love one another and be committed to care for one another. There's nothing that preventing saying that a person should not engage in sexually arousing behavior with another person. That doesn't preclude two people of the same gender from forming a household. Brothers and sisters and mothers and daughters sometimes do that. I think, though, it's going to come back to this fundamental question: what is sex for? To me, that's the question that has to be answered. If it's just put in an extremely broad way, like sex is just something that is a pleasurable activity we engage in with others for emotional or physical comfort, that could lead to a wide range of activities that we find to be very bad. I'll put a bow on this when we come back, but I'm very grateful that you called in.
Thank you very much, Sean. 888-318-7884. Catholic Answers Live, right back after this.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Who and what were the major figures and ideas of the Protestant Reformation? Is it true that the medieval Catholic Church was so corrupt that a total religious revolution was necessary? How did the Church respond to the Reformation? And what were its lasting effects on Christianity and world history? In 20 Answers, the Reformation, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, in a perfect introduction to the major players, concepts, and events of this defining period in Western history. 20 Answers, the Reformation is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting series from Catholic Answers Press.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the Church instead. But we should embrace sacred Scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the Church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the Church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Eight 318-7884 888-31-TRUTH, Catholic Answers Live. I am Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers, sitting in for Cy Kellett. My guest, Trent Horn. Trent, before the break, you were explaining to our friend Sean in Canada the Church is teaching with respect to people with same-sex attraction acting on their inclinations. Before I give it back to Trent, Sean, I know we lost you, but I do encourage you to visit couragerc.net. and on that website and through the Courage Apostolate. I think you're going to find a lot of good resources that can be helpful to you as you try to unpack what the church's teaching is on this question. Trent.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do to tie all that together is that the disagreement that Sean and many people have with the church's teaching on homosexuality and on same-sex marriage goes back to fundamental questions, namely, what is sex for and what is marriage, or what is marriage for? That's the question we have to answer. So I find it interesting that Sean's view is similar to many other people in that sex is permissible if it's between two people who are loving and committed to one another. But then I would ask, well, why should I believe that? The most basic level of morality when it comes to sex in our culture seems to be two people who consent, or at least two people who consent. And you'll find different perspectives. Some people say that love and commitment are important, but I would say, well, why? Why is that a necessary condition for sex to be moral? When is sex moral? When does it become immoral? If you define it very broadly that sex is just a way for people to express love and affection for other people, well, then why wouldn't broader sexual relations, things that we call adultery, it's like you're only allowed to have one spouse? Well, not like somebody says you can only have one friend.
Right.
That'd be possessive. You can only have one person. Either polyamory, which would be officiated adultery, with other people, or adultery, or serial adultery, which would be divorce, remarriage. If
it's an expression of friendship and love, why keep it exclusive?
Why keep it exclusive? Why worry about the marriage element, fornication, prostitution, pornography, polyamory? And then we have paraphilias. Paraphilias would be sexual disorders. And you can go to Wikipedia if you have a strong stomach. I appreciate that at least there's no bad pictures or anything like that, at least not that I'm aware of at this time. And you can scroll through a list of paraphilias, which would be sexual disorders, people being attracted to all sorts of things except for the proper end of the sexual act. And there are doozies on that list. I've tried to think of examples, Chris. When we dialogue about this issue, it's very important not to bring up examples that are landmines.
Right.
So when people say, what about homosexuality? Is it a proper ordered desire? If you say, well, do you think pedophilia is a proper ordered desire? Right. And of course it's not. The other person's just going to hear you say you think people who have homosexual inclinations are pedophiles, which is not what you said.
Right.
But that's what they're going to hear. So I try to pick paraphilias to say, is it obvious here that this is a sexual disorder? If you are sexually attracted to inanimate objects, trees, dinosaurs, that is one. Yep. Unfortunately, Chris, if you can think of it, there probably is a section of the internet dedicated to that particular paraphilia. So if even many other people listening will say, well, that is disordered. Well, why? If sex is just about having, well-being and good feelings in yourself expressed towards other people or things, what does it matter? Only understanding.
Now, Sean would argue here, but no, I was saying a committed relationship.
Right, and I would ask why. Why is it? When we say like committed relationship, normally what we mean by that is you agree not to have sex with other people.
Right.
It's a euphemism for saying I won't cheat on you.
Yes.
When we say the committed part. But why does that matter? And once again, it would be controlling if you said, you can only have one friend. I can have as many friends as I want. Yet we see sex as something restricted to only one person. We understand that monogamous element, but that it only takes two to tango. That only makes sense if sex is ordered towards uniting only two people towards a good beyond themselves.
Yes.
And that good would be the good of procreation. It's not always achieved. Much the same way as when you go and play baseball, you don't always hit a home run.
Nope.
But it's ordered towards that end. And so it's ordered towards that particular end for men and women. That's when it's ordered. And it becomes disordered when it's moved away from that. So I would say for Sean and others listening, I would say among Christians, the Catholic Church, and I've actually read atheists and other secular critics who give the Catholic... Oh, when I had my dialogue with Brandon Robertson here in the studio, he is a pro-LGBT Protestant pastor. He said in the dialogue, he actually appreciated the Catholic view on sexuality. Because he said, I talked to my other Protestant pastors who believe homosexual behavior is a sin, and he tells them, you guys don't see anything wrong with contraception, you don't see anything wrong with divorce, why do you see something wrong with homosexuality? And he said, I give the Catholics credit that at least they're consistent in everything.
Yes.
So I said, well, Give it some thought and come back to 2020 Gillespie at some point.
888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to Jonathan in Jackson, Florida. Jonathan, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hey, Trent. Hey, President Chris. Thank you all for having me.
We need to play Hail to the Chief, and anyone calls him that.
That's quite all right.
Not to beat a dead horse, but
Sure.
my question was actually had this interaction with somebody on Reddit. Well, actually, multiple people, because anybody can comment.
Sure.
And I was trying to break down, as Mother Teresa would say, beloved children of God with homosexual tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a Matt Fradd edition. That
I'm sure Mother
it is
Teresa
bound
said
by
it. She said
natural-
everything.
That's right.
So go right ahead.
Right. I'm trying to nail down natural law,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to say, okay, the speech is to tell the truth. Ears are to hear. Sexual organs are for reproduction, things like that. But none of those examples really hit. They basically said, like, by what authority are you telling me? And you said earlier, who, what, or when, how we use our sexuality is morally relevant. So
Right.
how is that morally relevant, and how does the church give us the moral authority, be it natural law or whatever it is, to say definitively that's intrinsically
Trent, where do you go with someone who says, I reject your teaching on natural law? I don't believe there is such a thing.
Well, there's several routes that you could go. One you could say is that the teaching on sexual ethics is not restricted to natural law. Sean and I had a discussion where I appealed to natural law principles or secular reasoning, which I think in this day and age is important. But I also think it's fine to say, what does God think about this? Like, we've lost sense of that a little bit. To say, why don't we see what has God told us about the proper use of our sexuality? It's kind of funny, Chris, that there are people who will defend, kind of more liberal Christians who will defend pro-LGBT sexual behavior and then write off the Bible. And yet they'll run to the Bible to defend things like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, paying laborers what they're worth, being good stewards of the environment, justice and compassion towards immigrants. And they'll quote Bible verse after Bible verse to support something that they believe in,
Sure.
but then shy away from Paul talking about how same-sex sexual behavior is disordered in Romans chapter 1 or 1 Corinthians chapter 6. So I'd say first, what has God told us sexuality is for? So you could even say, well, we can move from natural law just to divine revelation. Or you can go back to natural law and you can make a defense of natural law, Jonathan. You could say, look, sometimes I think what's helpful here is just to start with very basic intuitions, to say, are there some things that are always right and some things that are always wrong that oblige us to act in those ways? And to ask these people, what are you talking about here? What are we talking about with these things? So we agree that there are moral principles that exist. Like you could say, here's a universal good. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do good. Avoid evil. It seems clear these are obligations we have that are universal among human beings. And then there's some things that we ought never do, like do not torture a child for fun, do not engage in the act of rape, don't do evil that good may come from it. So I think, Jonathan, you could start with there saying, look, here are just very basic universal moral truths. We could call that natural law. So these truths exist. And what Thomas Aquinas says is that natural law is the rational creature's participation in the eternal law of God. So we know these truths exist. The next question becomes, how do we discover them? Are there different clues to that? Well, when we look at you could say, by what authority? Well, when you look at human beings, you know there are things about us that show we ought to behave in a certain way. Because we're capable of being rational, for example, we have a duty to be rational. So that's one example that you can bring. You can say, well, why can't I I'm on a dinosaur kick with my kids. Every morning, Matthew gets my bed. He says, can I watch another 10 facts video on dinosaurs? So on Council of Trent, we're going to do a dinosaur episode soon. But I know everything about Spinosaurus, Deinosuchus, all of them. But they'll go around and just, rip other dinosaurs' heads off if that's what they think will make their day better. Why can't I do that? Why am I held to a different standard than the dinosaurs or the lions at the zoo?
Hardly seems fair, Trent.
Yeah. Why not? Well, most people will say something like this. You can choose X or Y. And I'm guessing what they mean by choose is the good. So now we look at, because I have this rational capacity, I'm obliged to use it. It's interesting. So then we can start looking at our other aspects of our behavior. Jonathan, another analogy I like to use when it comes to bodily functions and moral use might be eating. That eating is ordered when we take in food to receive its nutrients. It's disordered when we take in food only for taste and then vomit up the nutrients later. And that's something similar you can apply to sexuality, only seeking the pleasure rather than the goods associated with it. So that's a few examples there. I'd also recommend a book by Jay Budichevsky. He has a book called What We Can't Not Know. So it's a book on natural law itself. Let me make sure that I got the title right here.
That sounds right.
What We Can't Not Know. What We Can't Not Know, a guide by Jay Budichevsky, Jay Bud known to his friends. I threw a lot out there at you, but is that at least a helpful start?
Yeah, it's great. I'm looking up that book right now. It's exactly what I needed because I think I was trying to reach out to the nuns that are just in this relative dictatorship of relativism, if you will, and I couldn't really hammer it down with examples. I was trying to get to something very succinct, and I couldn't.
We're very grateful for your call, Jonathan. I especially appreciate, Trent, that eating analogy because it goes it seems to me it goes to the heart of the matter that we all do, in fact, have a nature.
Yes.
We have a nature, and it is self-evident to us. Now, it's possible there are elements of our nature that are not immediately self-evident that Revelation has helped us with. I'm not even sure if that's true or not. But someone who is, I think, going to be honest with himself will say, yeah, I do have a nature, and when I do things that are contrary to that nature,
it's bad for me.
Yeah, it's bad for me, and that can be
I think what happens, Chris, before we go to the break here, is that people can see this in non-sexual elements easily. They see eating disorders for what they are. They see body identity disorders for what they are.
Or dragging or cutting yourself with a razor blade, or
right, mutilation, self-destruction,
right.
pica, which is a disorder where someone wants. There's actually a recent film that came out a year or two ago. I think it's called Swallow. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's a fictional account, but it's a real disorder of people who swallow glass, thumbtacks, and they have this desire to want to swallow inedible things that are not what they're meant to be eating. But I think when it comes to sex, what happens is people will throw common sense absolutely out the window. When it comes to other subjects, like obviously someone who is white is not black or African American, no matter what they say. And people will say it's racist for you to identify in that way. The Rachel Dolezal case a few years ago. But if a man identifies as a woman, well, we have to respect that, I guess. Why is it with sex? Is common sense always thrown out the window? I believe this happens because people are afraid that their proclivities, that if they condemned people with sexual desires, run of the mill on the standard median, if they were to say that transgender identity is disordered, or certain kinds of paraphilia, certain kinds of sexual disorders are disordered, if they were to put down a fence and say, oh, you can't do that, logical implications would move the fence closer and closer to them.
Yes.
And it would start to encroach on the things that they look at on the internet, on the things the sexual behaviors that they do in private. And so there is a deep concern, I think, in our culture of people who are not directly engaging in the more radical sexual behaviors, but they're hesitant to want to condemn those behaviors because they're worried that judgment will come back on the things that they do in secret. And
it's also clear that socially we continue to push the envelope.
Yeah, you push further. It's very hard to go backwards.
Amen. Amen.
Unless there's a dramatic, catastrophic decline of civilization.
Which, by the way, the book of Revelation may be one of the most misunderstood books in the Bible. Let Jimmy Akin break it down for you in his new MP3, Understanding Revelation. Guess what, my friends? This MP3 is free. Go to shop.catholic.com right now and click on the banner at the bottom of the page to download our new free MP3, Understanding Revelation. That's shop.catholic.com right back after this.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live. St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Next time on EWTN Live, Tawfiq Bellini shares how the nonprofit In Defense of Christians advocates for religious freedom and protection in the Middle East on the next EWTN Live.
EWTN Live with me, Father Mitch Patwell, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN TV and radio.
888-318-7884, 888-31 Truth. Trent, we're behind in calls here.
But we got time.
We do.
We have time indeed.
We have 2 hours, praise God, or an hour
and 15.
Hour and 15 minutes left. Alex in Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Alex, I don't know if you are aware of this, but you and all of the Nebraska Catholics, all the Nebraska faithful, are truly blessed with Spirit Catholic Radio. That is a first-rate Catholic radio network. Jim Carroll, who runs that network, is just the greatest guy, and we love our friendship with Spirit Catholic Radio. What is your question for Trent Horn?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
So we are blessed with the Spirit Catholic Radio out here. It's awesome to listen to you guys every day. So my question, I was posed the question, what is the difference between NFP and contraception, and the fact that with contraception you're saying, I don't want to have a baby. With NFP, you're tracking, the times when you do want to have sex, when you don't, so that way, in case you don't want to get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, what's the difference between that? Because both ways, you don't want to get pregnant.
Yeah, Trent, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the hour. I mean, if I'm practicing an FP, I'm intending not to have a baby. Is that right? Am I?
That's right.
Yeah. So help unpack this.
Yeah, so this is a question that comes up often. What is the difference between natural family planning and contraception? It also comes up in this as an argument that if contraception is a way to not have a baby, quote unquote, then natural family planning is a kind of contraception. So there's no meaningful difference between the two. A few different ways I would respond to this. First, a short bullet point would be this. NFP is information. Contraception is sterilization. That is the first key difference between the two. We'd ask, what is natural family planning? Natural family planning, in principle, is just information that you have about your spouse. It's information. And information, knowledge is power, as the PSA says. Information is not a bad thing if you have a right to that information, which we do have a right to know how our bodies work. So there's nothing wrong with having information and knowing if I engage in sexual relations on this day, there is a likelihood of conception. If I engage in it on this day, there is a lower likelihood. So it's information. Contraception, however, is not information. So it's information. And then from that information, you have 2 activities, neither of which can possibly be construed as contraception. From that information, you either have sexual relations where you fully and freely give yourself to one another without any barriers or chemicals between the spouses. So full, free, complete gift of self in sexual union, and abstinence, and any other recreational activity that would take place of sex within that abstaining period. So NFP can't be contraception because it's just full, free gift of self in sexual union without any barriers whatsoever, which hardly anyone would look at that activity and say the couple's engaging in contraception when there's no contraceptives to be had, or abstinence. And most people in our culture will say that abstinence is not the same thing as contraception. So they're very different in that regard. Contraception, however, is not information. It is sterilization. It is taking the sexual act and actively intervening into it to alter it, to prevent the husband and wife from fully and completely giving themselves to one another. So that's one way I make the distinction. There's another analogy. I talk about this in my course, Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching. And Alex, this is an analogy that I use to talk about NFP and contraception. It's predated me. Lots of other speakers have used it. It's called the wedding invitation analogy. And it goes like this. Suppose a couple, I've altered it a bit, actually. I think it works better this way. Suppose a couple is trying to pick a date for their wedding. In fact, we have some people here at the office who are trying to pick a date for their wedding to invite people, and under COVID restrictions, it's difficult to fit everyone in. So imagine a couple, engaged couple, is trying to pick a date for their wedding, all right? So they could pick a day where they know that all of their cousins will be able to arrive. They pick a day and send out invitations. They know, hey, the cousins are all free. We've got, my family has 60 of them. And we know they're free that Saturday. I'm going to send invitations, pick that day, and a lot of the cousins are going to show up, and that's great. But so that would be analogous to natural family planning and using it to engage in relations on a day where you're likely to conceive. You pick the day, likely for kids to show up. Suppose the couple said, however, we're going to schedule our wedding, but we actually can't have that many tables, COVID restrictions and all that. What are we going to do? So let's pick this day and we'll send out invitations. But you know what? I know that my cousins have a football tournament that Saturday. So odds are they're not going to be able to come. They're wanted, but we know they probably aren't going to show up. If they do, might be a bit stressful. It's a surprise that they're there, but we will manage and welcome them lovingly. That would be analogous if they pick the day and send the invitations when the cousins are unlikely to show up. That's using NFP to choose sexual relations on a low fertility day. Now, suppose the couple said, well, we really want that other Saturday, but we also don't want the cousins there. So we're going to pick our ideal Saturday, and we're going to send letters to the cousins saying, don't show up. We don't want you here. We're going to send them a disinvitation. You are not wanted. Don't even think of showing up. If you show up, we might have you killed later. Really don't want them there. That would be analogous to using contraceptives to engage in sexual relations on one's own terms, but communicating the message to the future life that may be conceived, it is unwanted, and if it does break through, it may meet a fatal end later. So I talk about that more at length in my course and also in my book, co-written with Layla Miller on Made This Way, which if you stay on the line, I'm happy to send you a copy. I threw a lot out at you there. I'll send you the book for you to read and review what I went over. Is that at least a good start?
I think that's great. Another side question.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I said also, but then they said, well, how's that being open to life when you only will have relations on the days that you know that you're not going to
Sure.
Be fertile?
And so, Alex, what I would say here is earlier I said that NFP is in principle information. Using this information, having this information, it's not sinful. Like, it's not sinful to know when your partner is fertile or infertile. However, natural family planning can be abused.
Yes.
It can be abused so that it is used exclusively to prevent children from being conceived under circumstances when they should be welcomed. What the church teaches is that a couple may use natural family planning to space the births of their children. In fact, they ought to space the births of their children, but they should do that, and they may use natural family planning if they have a just reason for doing so. They have to have a just reason. So if it is a reason that conforms to the good of their family, like let's say they don't feel financially prepared to receive a child, maybe they just lost their health insurance and they're concerned about affording birth, they just have to have a just reason for using this, because God gave us all married couples, all different kinds of days throughout the years to engage in the sexual act. This information can be abused, just as information about our neighbor's faults. We may have that information. It's not a sin to have that information if we acquired it in a sinless way, but we could use that information to do something sinful with it. Much the same with natural family planning. You could use that information to sinfully abstain from sexual acts that are likely to conceive. So one ought to be open to life. But here's the thing. With natural family planning, it's not 100%. Even if you engage on a low fertility day, it is still possible to conceive a child. What God asks of us is simply this: to be open to life, is to fully and freely, when a husband and wife engage in the marital act, to fully give themselves to one another whenever they do so. That's all God asks from us. And so when we do that, there are days he's given us where that's likely to result in the conception of a child. There are days where it's not likely. So to be open to life just means fully giving oneself in those acts. But one could be not open to life if you use NFP in a calculated long-term way to oppose conceiving a child for reasons that are not just. So I hope that's helpful, and I'd recommend the book Made This Way. We'll be sure to send you a copy of that.
Alex, we'll also send you a copy of Inseparable. So we celebrated 2 years ago in 2018 the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae, Paul VI encyclical addressing the question of artificial contraception. I think it's the best book we came out with in 2018. I'm actually not sure, Trent, if any of your books came out that year, so forgive me. Anyway.
Something was around that time.
But nonetheless, forward by Cardinal Burke. It's called Inseparable, shop.catholic.com. Folks, Catholics, non-Catholics, if you're trying to get your imagination, your understanding around this question, and Trent has done a good job, but it is an involved question and one that confounds a lot of folks. So get a copy of Inseparable, shop.catholic.com. 888-318-7884. We're going to take a 5 minute, 6, Nick Chamberlain, what is it? I can never remember. 5 minute break, and we will be back with the second hour and Trent Horn. Catholic Answers Live. Catholic Answers Live, Hour 2. I am Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers. My guest, I am sitting in for Cy Kellett, and my guest today, super apologist at Catholic Answers. You have a title, staff apologist.
Yes.
I've always thought staff apologist was kind of, I don't know, it's sort of...
It's like someone you picked up at a call center. Like,
Yeah,
you want to be our staff apologist?
staff-
We got a cubicle over here for you if you want to do that.
Yes, it's like you're the apologist for the staff.
Oh, yes.
If any of the staff have questions.
If anyone only here at 2020 Gillespie has a question, they go to my cubicle.
And you answer questions for the staff.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like the staff copyist, the staff editor.
Right.
I guess, yeah, why wouldn't it? Is it redundant? Should I just be the Trent Horn Catholic Answers apologist?
Yeah. I like super apologist.
I'm quite happy to have that. We know, Jimmy's the senior apologist, so we have to see how senior is going to, I think, rank above super.
Super, yeah. And then Carlo could be awesome apologist. I think this, we have to have a focus group on this. But just to be clear, you are not the kind of staff apologist that you need penicillin to get rid of.
No,
Right?
I am not a Staphylococcus apologist.
Okay, Staphylococcus
That's
apologist.
what, if some new disease comes from here, I think that's what we should call it. So, or if we discover it, like let's say myself and Jimmy, we have all kinds of esoteric other hobbies.
Right.
On Jimmy Akin's podcast, Mysterious World, he talks about the weird, paranormal, and the strange. On Council of Trent, my podcast, which you can check out, Council of Trent on iTunes podcast app. I have theology Tuesdays and Thursdays. Friday are free-for-all events. You never know what I'll end up talking about on Fridays. But hey, maybe if we get in a hobby and discover some new bacterium here, we'll call it Staphylococcus apologist. Staff apologist.
Okay. I hope it doesn't shut down the economy.
Well, maybe we'll be able to derive some life-saving treatment from it, much as like happened with penicillin.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah, from some citrus fruit that went bad.
Yeah. Whether it's loaves of bread or orange or whatever. Maybe I'll check the fridge now. You just tell Emily to stop cleaning the fridge on Fridays because maybe the key to the next healthcare development is waiting in there to mold.
That's Emily Sanchez, my super awesome assistant, Emily Sanchez. There are some things, Trent, that I can tell her to do, and then there are many things I cannot. And I don't think I can morally tell Emily not to clean the fridge on Fridays.
Might also, given the state of California, you legally can't do that. There's lots of things with health code here. We can't even walk down most of the hallways here in certain directions.
Unless you're following the arrows.
Follow the arrows.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, now I know that our friend on Facebook, Patrick, is saying, when is Chris going to get to the questions? I wonder if he's typed that yet.
We will find out.
888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. The show is Catholic Answers Live. I am Chris Check. My guest is Trent Horn. And the topic this hour is the same as it was last hour. Which Catholic moral teaching do you reject? Let's go to Jean in West Hartford, Connecticut. Jean, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, yes. I have forever grappled with the idea of people burning in hell for an eternity. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but I was raised Catholic, switched over to the Baptist church, and the Baptists kind of teach that purgatory that the Catholics teach which is a nice thought, isn't really in the Bible.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know if I'm on the right topic here, but I just really struggle with a loving God sending someone to burn for eternity in hell.
All right, Trent, hell, is it forever?
Well, here's what the Catechism says, and then maybe we can chat about your discomfort with it. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says in paragraph 1035, the teaching of the Church affirms the existence of hell and its eternity. Immediately after death, the souls of those who die in a state of mortal sin descend into hell, where they suffer the punishments of hell, eternal fire, and that is in quotation marks in the Catechism. The chief punishment of hell is eternal separation from God, in whom alone man can possess the life and happiness for which he was created and for which he longs. So, and Pope St. John Paul II has also talked about this, that the Bible's descriptions of hell, just like its descriptions of heaven, are images that are used for us to understand the afterlife, but it hasn't been fully revealed to us. So the Church does not teach about what the literal nature of hell is, whether it involves literal fire, because other images of hell that are used in the Bible seem to contradict this. For example, Jesus also talks about hell being an outer darkness, but we know the fire generates light. So that would seem contradictory there. When we see that, once again, heaven, we talk about heaven being like banquets and other elements like that are not necessarily literal descriptions of heaven. There are other descriptions of hell that may not be literal. But what we do know that is literal about hell, that's even more scary than the idea of fire, is the idea of spending eternity apart from God, who is the source of all goodness. Gene, what I would say here is I agree with you. I also would not be able to understand a God who sends people to hell, who desire to spend eternity with him, who through no fault of their own, God makes them and then he sends them to hell. Calvinists believe in something like this called double predestination, and that God chooses who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. Catholics reject that absolutely and unequivocally. God doesn't send anyone to hell. However, God does want us to be free. God is love, 1 John 4:8. And love has to be free. Love is not love if it's forced. And it's kidnapping, and it's Stockholm Syndrome, and it's unpleasant. So God is love, and he lets us freely choose to love him, which also means he freely lets people reject him. So that could involve people, if they choose to reject God and goodness in this life, they may reject him for all eternity as well, and God will not force them into a loving relationship with him in heaven. So that's where hell comes about, that hell is not something that God made per se. It's more something that we made with our sins. So I'm happy to dialogue with you more about this because I know it's a very contentious subject. But before we continue, do you see what I'm saying about the difference between God doesn't send people to hell, he allows people to choose to reject him? Do you see how there'd be a difference between those two things?
Yes, as long as, I guess, people are aware of him.
Okay, so it sounds like, Gene, would you agree there could be some cases where it would make sense for God to allow someone to be damned, like someone who loves evil and says, I hate God, I'm going to do what I want, commits horrible deeds, like they're a serial killer, they're a rapist, a racist murderer, they're a very, very bad person who says they hate God and they want to live their life however they want to. So it might make sense in that case. It would make sense in that case for God to let that person be separated from him for all eternity. So like in some cases, would you say hell makes sense?
I would still have a hard time saying that, like, eternal damnation is warranted.
Right. And I think
I would think maybe just annihilation.
Okay, well that is a different view, because I think that if these people exist, so it sounds like you wouldn't accept universalism, that everybody goes to heaven, because if you have the rate,
right, exactly, that doesn't make sense.
Okay, yeah, and so that is another view, the idea that, well, would God just simply annihilate these people? Is it wrong for him to allow people to exist eternally apart from him? And I would say that it's not wrong for God to do that. I would say that the two objections here, well, the main objection would be God is allowing an eternal consequence for a temporal decision. But I don't think that it's the case that God is giving eternity merely because of what somebody does just in this life. One way to look at it is that God gives us the opportunity to choose him in this life. In the next life, our wills become fixed, or at the very least, what will happen for these people who are damned is that the reason hell is eternal is not because God makes it so. It's that they continue to reject God and become more and more fixed in their ways. It's kind of like, it's interesting, Gene, when when I've met people in life who reach advanced age, 70, 80, or 90, and I'm sure, Chris, you probably had this experience. I think sometimes we see that people reach an extreme version of character seeds that they sowed in their 20s or 30s. Mm-hmm. So someone who practiced generosity and meekness and bravery and kindness as a young person, they're just the sweetest elderly person you could meet.
I had an old friend who used to say people become more like themselves the older they get.
Yes. And then there are some elderly people that the title cranks are applied to them. Mm-hmm. Curmudgeoned is another word, that the seeds of vice and hatred they sowed as young people, now they're able to hide it because as a young person, you can be charming and you might be able to navigate the social realms.
Are you saying old people aren't charming? Is this where this is going here, Trent?
No, what I'm saying is that they may get the point of they don't feel like putting up the facade anymore.
Right.
That when you're younger, you have to put up a facade to advance in your career, to get married. But then when you reach a certain age in life, you say, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to speak what's on my mind, and that's that. And so I think that sometimes, Gene, that then people become more, if they become more and more themselves, imagine you live eternally and God respects your existence. He respects that you exist and your free choices, and he allows you to live, and you just become more of that. And so for all eternity, that damned person, one element of good, you say, well, how does good come from that? Well, they serve forever as a sign of God's justice. They forever exist as a sign of the justice of God and of his mercy towards sinners who he has saved, who could not save themselves from that fate. So there is some good that can still come from that. Gene, what I would recommend, though, let's get your email address. I will send you some resources. First, my friend and colleague Carla Broussard just published an article on Catholic Answers Magazine online about why an eternal hell, or an everlasting hell, I should say, is not unjust. And I have also done articles on annihilationism, that when it comes to the nature of hell, we can have our thoughts about it, but we should also just go back to divine revelation and what God tells us about it. So give us your email address to the call screener. I'll send you some of my resources on annihilationism and why the Bible does not teach that, as well as other resources on the nature of hell. But I'm grateful that you called, and I hope you'll call back again sometime.
Thanks very much, Gene. Let's go to Anonymous. Anonymous, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, Mr. Horn.
Hi.
Hi. I think it's the first time you and I are talking, but that's not here nor there.
Sure.
Okay, I do have a question concerning morality, but it's theological in nature. So I'm going to read two verses, okay?
Okay.
Out of Matthew chapter 5.
Okay.
So it says here, just part of verse 22. So it says here, you fool, and whoever says you fool shall be guilty enough to go into fiery hell.
Uh-huh.
And it says here, verse 28, but everyone who looks at a woman lusts after her and has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
That's right. Yes.
So now I take the first passage as implying a murderous heart. So if that is equated with murder, as in sufficient to go to the lake of fire,
right?
At least the guilt of it. And if I lust in my heart to commit adultery, because I'm thinking in my brain, and that I think every normal man, every normal Roman Catholic deals with this every day, why is it not a mortal sin?
Why is what not a mortal sin? I'm not sure if I...
The deliberate desire to commit adultery, why is the deliberate desire to commit adultery not a mortal sin even if you don't act on it? Is that what you're asking, Anonymous?
Correct. So it's a thank you, sir. So it's adultery in my heart and murder in my heart such that I call a person fool, you fool. So
right.
Which is sufficient to have guilt. So why would not those things not be a mortal sin? Why would it not be a mortal sin?
Well, what the church teaches when we look at the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, and the ninth, well, this is really involving three commandments here. The fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. And the ninth commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, covet your neighbor's wife. They all move together here. And what the church does teach is that sinful anger can be mortal, and sinfully dwelling on lustful thoughts is a grave matter. The church teaches when it comes to something being a mortal sin, there are three conditions that are required. It has to be grave matter. It has to be something that you fully know that it is a grave matter. You have full knowledge of the sin involved, and you fully intend or cooperate with the sin in nature. That it's not coerced. You're freely choosing it. Those three elements are what makes something a mortal sin. So the church does not teach that certain behaviors are mortal sins, because two of the elements involved are subjective. They depend on the person. The church does teach that several things are grave matter. Something can be grave matter just because of what it is. And so what the church teaches about grave matter is that it involves typically a violation of the commandments. And so the Catechism talks about how sinful anger, dwelling not even necessarily on murderous thoughts, but dwelling on thoughts in your mind of desiring malice towards your neighbor, to dwell on that and to be fixated upon it, that's grave matter. To dwell on lustful thoughts towards committing adultery or fornication. The Catechism condemns lust in paragraph 2351, and it talks about the ninth commandment in paragraphs 2514 to 2516. So the church does say that this kind of dwelling on these thoughts is a grave matter. We have to just be careful to distinguish that from passing thoughts, that there are always going to be, we are fallen creatures. There are going to be disordered thoughts that pop into our mind all the time. It's kind of like popcorn kernels in the machine. Like, they're going to pop out of there and be the popcorn. The question is, are we going to eat the popcorn, or are we going to throw it in the trash? I don't know if that's a great analogy. It was the first thing that popped in my head. But the thoughts pop up like the kernel of popcorn. We can't control where the thoughts emanate. We can control whether we dwell on them or not. And to dwell on them or fixate upon either sinful anger or sinful lust, the church does teach that is grave matter, and that can lead to a mortal sin and separate us from God. So we must seek purity of heart and purity of mind. Is a very difficult thing to do. That is why frequent reception of the sacraments, confession, reconciliation, Eucharist, and prayer are so vital as we struggle against the sins of the flesh, what St. John calls lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So I hope that's helpful for you, and I'm grateful you called in.
Anonymous, we got to go to break. Trent, I would add fasting to that
Yes.
list also. My friends, have you read the award-winning Catholic Answers magazine? If you have not, why not? Well, here's a great opportunity. You're going to love it. We've packaged digital copies of Catholic Answers magazine so that you can get the past year's issues for less than $10 a year, or you can get 8 years worth of digital magazine issues for $39.95. That's 48 issues of Catholic Answers magazine for $39.95. That comes out to $5 a year. What a bargain. Visit the ebook and magazine section at shop.catholic.com and check out our new offerings. That's shop.catholic.com. Right back after this.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
Every single day, I get to help our listeners of the Sunrise Morning Show wake up, find out what's going on in the church and the world, and then walk with them as we all seek to grow in knowledge and love of Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith. I mean, how could it get any better?
The Sunrise Morning Show with Anna Mitchell and Matt Swain. Tomorrow morning, 6 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH, Catholic Answers Live. I am Chris Check, sitting in for Cy Kellett. The topic today, what Catholic moral teaching do you reject? To help you with your question, awesome apologist Trent Horn. Let's go to John in Huntington Beach, California, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. John, thanks for putting the CA Live app on your phone. What's your question for Trent?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Well, I guess my question would be about morality, biblical morality, and the foundation of God's morality. But let's say an ancient Israelite woman living under the Mosaic law a couple thousand years ago, 2,500, 3,000 years ago, was tired of, just tired of the blood of killing doves and killing goats and sprinkling their blood on the altar and burning their corpses and burnt offerings. And she went to her husband and her children and people in the village that she was living and said, I don't want to worship that God anymore. I'm just tired of all the death and the blood. I want to worship the sun that greets me every morning and provides me with the light that I see my children with, and it provides the flowers that I find so beautiful. It ends the day for me in a beautiful sunset. I want to worship the sun. And she goes around trying to convince other people to worship the sun as well. It's pretty clear in Deuteronomy 13 and then again in Deuteronomy 17 that she has to be put on trial. If two or three people testify to her trying to get them to worship a God other than the God of the Israelite people, that she's to be taken to the edge of the village and stoned to death.
Mm-hmm.
It says that her husband is supposed to cast the first stone, and he's to show her no mercy. And
Okay, so John, it sounds like you object to the Old Testament's teaching that purposely leading people away from worshiping the true God is a capital offense. So you don't like that was a teaching in the Old Testament, or you disagree with that?
No, that's a misstatement. What I don't like is this woman's practicing her religious freedom. I think we can all agree that religious freedom is a fact, that we have that. It's a moral fact. That's all she's doing. And the God of the Catholic faith insists that she be stoned to death. Let's talk a little bit about stoning someone to death.
John,
we have a good image of what stoning is, but we're trying to understand exactly what's your question.
John, what's your question?
Would you stone that person to death if you were an ancient Israelite living under the Mosaic Law? Do you affirm that conduct? Would you do it personally yourself?
How does a Catholic reconcile these passages in the Mosaic Law, Trent?
Mm-hmm. So, John, what I would do is here's a principle that I would follow, and I'm curious if you would follow this. I would always follow the commands that an all-knowing and all-good God gives me. Would you do the same?
I'm sorry, I did speak over you, so I missed your question. I apologize.
I would follow the commands that an all-good God who created the universe, who is the sum of perfection itself, I would follow the commands of that which is perfection itself. Would you do the same?
No, I wouldn't, because it's not perfection. Would you do it if it was your own wife? Would you stone your own wife to death? It's the God that
so, John, you're saying that it is a fact that it is wrong to execute someone because they practice a certain religion.
I think that is certainly an American fact that we have religious freedom. I'm going on American values, not the values of the God that you worship. You still haven't answered my question. It sounds like you would in fact stone your own wife to death, because that is in fact what the God of the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 13 and again in 17 demands that you do if she tries to get you to worship the sun, which is really not that bad.
John, would you have a problem if this woman was telling people she wants them to worship the sun, and the best way to do that is to sacrifice their children, which happened frequently in antiquity?
Well, that's a different thing altogether. I would have a huge problem with that, obviously, but that's not the situation that we have.
Why isn't that religious freedom, John?
Well, no, John, she's practicing her religious freedom. And that was very common in religions of that time, to sacrifice their children to the sun or to other deities. Should they be free to practice their religious freedom?
Even in the United States, religious freedom has its limits. That's murder, so we don't allow people to murder other people and then use religious freedom as an excuse for that. So no, it wouldn't be.
Would it be okay if we as a country changed our laws and allowed a religious freedom exemption for sacrificing children? If we just changed the law, just like other things, we've changed the law before on slavery and segregation and same-sex marriage. If we changed the law and allowed sacrificing children to sun worshipers, deities, if that was then an American fact and law, would there be anything wrong with it?
Yes, I would be totally opposed to that. I would fight that. I would fight that with everything that I had in me.
John, how do you know it's wrong? How do you know it's wrong?
I believe the Constitution of the United States is pretty clear that, the mantra of American values is that.
So it sounds like your basis of morality flows from whatever American law and the Constitution says.
Okay, so you've moved these goalposts. You've built a straw man for me to argue against. You haven't really answered my question. The fact is...
Fine, I'll answer your question. Yeah, I would carry out, if I was in ancient Israel, I would carry out God's law, and I would enact capital punishment against those who broke God's law. And if they very well know the law, don't you think people should be held accountable? So there, I've answered your question. I know you find that repugnant, but I believe your view is the repugnant one, because you have no standard for morality. So my question for you is, does morality, your source of morality, is it an American legal document? Is that your source of what makes things right or wrong?
Yes, it's called the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. I'm a little bit, to say that I don't have a source of morality because I don't believe in stoning my own family members to death is a little bit.
So, John, then here's my question. Does the Constitution have amendments?
Yes, it does.
Do the amendments all have equal force?
Well, that gets interpreted by the courts, and it gets very complicated. But that would be the American standard of morality is what we have.
All 27 amendments, right? Is it what, 27?
Biblical standard of reality.
John, okay, here's what I think we have to let you go because here's the problem. If you added that 28th Amendment for child sacrifice, you would be against it, which shows you have a universal standard of morality beyond our Constitution, a law above laws that can only be rooted in a universal and transcendent God. So in trying to undermine God with morality, you've actually used morality to prove God does exist.
Catholic Answers Live, right back after this.
Your number one source for Catholic apologetics and evangelization. Catholic Answers Live.
What are the basics of Jewish belief and practice? How does modern Judaism differ from the Hebrew religion of the Old Testament? Is Christianity to blame for historic anti-Semitism and for not doing enough to stop the Holocaust? Judaism is the ancient foundation of Christianity, yet many Catholics remain ignorant of its beliefs. 20 Answers Judaism dispels that ignorance with a helpful overview of Judaism's history, its forms of worship, and sources of doctrine and more. 20 Answers Judaism is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
(888) 318-7884. About 30 minutes left with Trent Horn. What Catholic moral teaching do you reject? Trent, assistant producer Marie had a good question for our previous caller there.
Yes, she did. That he was very offended at the idea of the ancient Israelites administering capital punishment towards those who would lead Israel astray and violating religious freedom. And we asked, well, what is your source of that moral standard? And he appealed to the American principles of freedom of religion. But then by that standard, how could ancient Israel be held accountable to a moral standard that arose 3,500 years later after the fact, or 3,000 years later?
That poor Israelite woman didn't have the American Constitution to turn to.
So how could he judge the people of that time according to a moral standard that didn't exist? And I think it shows that if you try to place your moral standard in these transitory elements that change, you can't ground morality successfully. So I thought it was interesting there in that discussion that what people will do sometimes is they'll look at the Old Testament and try to denigrate it according to their own moral standards. And yet their own moral standards don't actually have any support whatsoever.
Right.
And so that leads to the problem of your moral foundations. If you're going to treat them as a fact that is binding upon everyone, where is the ultimate source of that fact, and where does it come from?
And correct me if I'm wrong, the words freedom of religion or religious freedom do not in fact appear in the American Constitution. Now, there is something about the establishment of a national religion.
Yeah, so the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or preventing the free exercise thereof. So essentially what that means is the U.S. promised we wouldn't make a national church, which was very common in England at the time.
Right.
And
though the various states had what you might describe as national churches.
Yes, although the Constitution does have provisions that prevent requiring religious tests for oaths of office and other things like that. However, later in the U.S. Supreme Court history, this was a case, Reynolds versus the United States in the 19th century, involving Mormon polygamists. And where the Supreme Court ruled that religious freedom is not unlimited because the Mormons, this was prior to their first revelation. God said polygamy was okay at the beginning with Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, and Mormons believe in progressive revelation. So then God later told their president that no, polygamy is not okay at around the same time the U.S. government was cracking down on them for practicing polygamy. So what the court, Reynolds versus the U.S., said that no, religious freedom cannot be unlimited. If it were, every man would be a law unto himself.
Right.
Now, interesting here on this gentleman's objection to capital punishment being administered for leading people astray and blasphemy. There are, of course, other issues I was not able to get into to fine-tune with this gentleman. It was more of a contentious engagement, if you will. Because if I had time, I would point out multiple factors, such as I do in my book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. First, it may be the case that these punishments, they are described in Scripture, but they're not always carried out, rarely or never carried out, that they're meant as a kind of warning. They're a maximum penalty meant for a particularly flagrant violation of the law. It's kind of like when you play a DVD or the old VHS tapes, it would say, if you copy this tape, 5 years in prison and $250,000. And I would sit there when I was a kid. I'm like, so if I make a copy of Home Alone, I'm gonna end up in prison for 5 years? No, they save that punishment for the most flagrant copyright violators. They just have to put it on there. So there are cases where we're not sure how this case law was applied in ancient Israel. Number two, when you look at this in our modern culture, we often don't understand when we talk about the virtues of religious freedom. That was built upon religion being the backbone of society to give us a stable society in the first place. That people think that religion nowadays is just an accessory to life, whereas throughout most of human history up until the modern age, it was a central element of civilization, that to undermine it was essentially treason.
Yes.
And so we understand that even today in the United States, treason is a capital punishment. Treason is a capital offense. If you commit treason against the United States, if you put U.S. national security in jeopardy, if you sold secrets to our enemies or something like that, if you were a spy, you could be executed. And we hold that as a firm punishment because it's something that can risk people's lives and welfare. Well, then you have to go back 3,500 years to ancient Israel wandering in the desert amongst foreign tribes out to destroy them either through active warfare or by leading them away from the true God and into idolatrous, murderous, sexually disordered practices.
Beelphegor, or however it is you say that.
Baal Peor?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yes. So worshiping Baal Peor, Molech. And so what he's talking about here is like, oh, they just worship the sun. And it's like, no, in my book, Hard Sayings, I talk about how the Canaanites engaged in child sacrifice by fire. The Leviticus is very clear. It tells the Israelites, do not send your children through fire to Molech. It has to put it there plainly. And now some biblical scholars, Chris, have said, well, the Israelites were making that up to justify invading Canaan. But no, we have discovered in Carthage and in other areas, we have found deposits that include the bones of toddlers
and
fetuses.
Tophets. They call them the Tophets.
Yes. Yeah. So we found now, and it's not a graveyard because we've also found significant amounts of charcoal,
right?
Which shows that these, and they're also Plutarch. Plutarch gives us a brutal description of one of these sacrifices where the child is placed in the bronze arms of the statue,
and falls into the fire,
and the fire leaps up, and the child writhes about and falls. It's just horrible things, and that's what is happening here, and that people don't understand that if we. They take it for granted that we now live in a time where you can call 911 and someone on the other end will come and help you if there's a problem. But if we I'm getting into my conspiracy theory mode here, but things would be very different. We would have a better understanding of what ancient Israel went through if one of our enemies were to detonate a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse device. Imagine one day we have the world it is now, and then the next day,
no communications.
Your lights don't work. Your cell phone doesn't work. Water doesn't come out of the tap.
Right.
The internet doesn't turn on.
Right.
You would start to see people, what would happen in that situation is people would come together in clans and gangs. And there would be a very harsh form of punishment and justice that would be meted out for pure survival. And then people would start to see what ancient Israelites and others had to go through, which is why God's revelation in the Old Testament, as Pope Benedict said in his apostolic exhortation Verbum Domini, is a progressive one, leading people ultimately to the moral ideals that we find in Jesus Christ.
You know, Trent, in my forthcoming course for the School of Apologetics that will be out this fall on the Inquisition, or Inquisitions, I should say. I start with Moses, all right, the first inquisitor, you might say. But I address this very question that there was a time when religion was so central to the social life that people regarded heresy as treasonous. Yeah.
Right.
To say nothing of threatening someone's immortal
soul.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's murder to kill the body, what about killing the soul?
Right.
And then I have to work now on my forthcoming book about evangelization in the apocalypse. I'm going to call it "Be the Light of Christ When the Lights Go Out Forever."
I think we'll sell a lot of copies of those. Of course, how are we going to sell them if we don't have, shop.catholic.com?
We got to get them out now.
Right.
So before it hits, we need to do that.
John in Kansas City, Missouri on KEXS. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you, guys. I'm looking for a Catholic answer to this argument.
Okay.
That is used by 75% of couples, that a couple can make the judgment using their conscience that something that has been defined as objectively and intrinsically evil, like contraception, can be used permissibly in the sight of God because their conscience is inviolable. In Humane Vitae Casti Connubii and centuries of Christian teaching is doctrine and not dogma.
Sure. Okay. So the objection is my conscience. I must always follow my conscience, and if the teaching on contraception has not been infallibly defined, I am free to not follow that teaching. Now, when it comes, let's settle straight what the church's teaching on conscience is. In paragraph 1790 of the Catechism, the church teaches, a human being must always obey the certain judgment of his conscience. If he were deliberately to act against it, he would condemn himself. Yet, it can happen that moral conscience remains in ignorance and makes erroneous judgments about acts to be performed or already committed. And so the error here is I would bring to that person's attention that this is a matter not even so much of conscience about morality, what one ought to do, but understanding ecclesiology and theology, which is what the church teaches. And so as Catholics, we are obliged to obey the church's teachings, not just those that have been infallibly defined. Now, there are moral theologians who say that the teaching on contraception has been infallibly defined, and there are others who say that it has not. But even if it has not been infallibly defined, most of the church's teachings have not been given to us with an infallible definition. And yet we are required to give those teachings the religious submission of mind and will. And so to act against them, act against them in our private lives, so to not follow them. Or so, for example, the church's teaching on IVF has not been, in vitro fertilization has not been infallibly defined, but it would be a sin to procure a embryo through IVF. It's a sin to violate the church's teachings that are not infallibly defined. They require the religious submission of mind and will. I point to in the church's teachings where it says that we have to obey them, at the very least obey them, and not counsel others to disobey them. So there, that argument from conscience doesn't fly, where I would say, okay, you have this judgment of your conscience. How do you square it with these two teachings? One, we must give religious submission of mind and will to what the church teaches, and the church teaches the contraception is sinful. So you have this judgment of your conscience, but how in the world could your conscience not be in error when it clearly violates these two clear teachings of what we must obey and then what the church prohibits us from doing. So I would recommend that as an option. And also, if you would like to go deeper into the subject of what the church teaches, I would recommend my friend Jimmy Akin's book, Teaching with Authority, by Jimmy Akin, Teaching with Authority. It goes into great detail on these questions. You may find it to be very helpful.
888-318-7884. My friends, we all would like to be as adept as Trent is at answering moral questions. Well, here's how you can begin to prepare yourself to be. Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching, What the Church Teaches on Right and Wrong, is a full-length course from the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics taught by Trent Horn. There are 60 easy-to-watch video segments and a study guide, online quizzes. You can take the course at your own pace. Abortion, euthanasia, homosexuality, just war, embryo ethics, human cloning, contraception, pornography, divorce and remarriage, etc., etc. So if you want to get good at answering these moral and ethical questions, then sign up for this course, Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching, What the Church Teaches on Right and Wrong. How do I do that? Visit schoolofapologetics.com today. Oh, wait, Trent, we're offering an introductory price that saves you $30 off if you sign up right now. But this price won't last forever. Well,
sign up.
Nothing's going to last forever, but
except for the new heaven and new earth. Nothing we have here as it is will last forever.
I think that this deal is going to go away sooner than a lot of other things.
That's right. So you'll want to sign up now. It's a course I think that you'll enjoy. So definitely check out our Catholic Answers School of Apologetics, Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching. And then also very, very soon, coming up, sneak preview, I have a new course that'll be out soon. So we'll let everyone know when it comes out. And that course is called Creation from Nothing? ?
Wow.
And so it's a defense of the church's teaching on creation.
Our School of Apologetics is awesome. It really is. It's fantastic. Congratulations to the guys in the video department and press, and Jimmy Akin, who's the dean of it, and the apologists who are the teachers, and the IT guys who found the platform. That was a real team effort here. Schoolofapologetics.com, right back after this.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He was a mystic and reformer who died at the age of 33.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Catherine of Siena accomplished something no one thought possible. She convinced Pope Gregory XI to return to Rome after the popes had lived in France for almost the whole of the 14th century. They've been there ever since.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. I am Chris Check, sitting in for Cy Kellett, my guest, Trent Horn. Just about 12 minutes left here, Trent. Let's see if we can knock out these remaining calls.
Yes. Before we do, I want to give a special shout out, though. I got the special present in the mail for me, the Word on Fire Bible.
Oh, from our friends at Word on Fire.
Yes, I really enjoy it. It's quite
very handsome. I have to say, all their stuff is very good looking.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, they have an aesthetic sense up there at Word on Fire.
Quite photogenic indeed.
Yeah.
This one is the Gospels. So, I mean, you could see it's the Gospels, but it's almost as thick as a New Testament or even an entire Bible. But it's beautifully bound. Has a lot of commentary from Bishop Barron. It's just really a treat. So I'm really glad that they sent this to me, and I highly recommend it for others. Go definitely check out the Word on Fire Bible with the Gospels. You won't be disappointed.
This is the thing I think we can praise our friends at Word on Fire for, maybe even most for. They understand that beauty is a way to draw people back to Jesus.
Totally. Yeah. Truth, beauty, and goodness. And I think that We here at Catholic Answers, we spend a lot of time on the truth element.
Right.
I mean, look at this show. We're going through arguments, logical premises, inferences, and that's good. And people need to do that. And there are rational ways to coming to believe in God and His church. But Chris, and sometimes I worry though that people think that's the only way,
right?
And that the Holy Spirit can work through people in a variety of ways. So I believe there are rational, but also non-rational ways, not irrational. That'd be opposed to reason,
right?
But I believe that if somebody goes to Saint Chapelle's in Paris and prays the Hail Mary and stands and is flooded in light under the stained glass window and feels the Holy Spirit moving within them, I think that's a very valid way to come to believe in the reality of God apart from formal arguments.
Those are some of the most spectacular windows
it's beautiful.
in the world, in the
It
Saint
is
Chapelle,
beautiful.
built by St. Louis to house the crown of thorns.
Which saint? Oh, yeah, by St. Louis.
King St. Louis.
King St. Louis.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully if his statue gets torn down, they can take it back to Saint Chapelle.
Yeah.
They can't stay up here. I think I remember when I was there, the one thing that struck out at me, I mean, you go to Notre Dame and it's huge. I remember Saint Chapelle being quite small, actually.
It is.
It's tiny. You get in.
kind of around the corner there. They're both on the Ile there.
And also speaking to St. Louis, on the Ile de St. Louis, there is a wonderful ice cream shop named Bertoli's. If you're ever in Paris, you won't be disappointed.
That sounds like it's run by an Irishman, Bertoli's.
Yeah, but it is. I went there with my wife on our honeymoon. Line was out the door, waited like a half hour. It's completely worth it. When we also went to dinner, we got reservations at 7:00. Only people in the restaurant. So like the Parisians like to start their dinners, I think, at like 9:30. And so
I have two places in Paris that I love. One is on the Rue du Bac. That's the Miraculous Medal Chapel there, right, where it all happened. And you go in there, that you see very few Parisians. You always see lots of very devout, Filipino nuns or something there praying.
Yes.
And the heart of Vincent de Paul. But then also not far from there on the Rue Vaugirard is the Convent of the Carme, where in the September massacres in 1789, all those priests were hauled in by the sans-culottes, and they turned the sanctuary into a revolutionary court, and they brought the priests in 2 by 2 and said, will you sign, for the new revolutionary or national church? And to a man, the priest said, no, we will not sign, and they cut him to pieces. And if you go in the refectory, which is on the second floor above the church there, you can see where the sans-culottes rested in the middle of the slaughter and to have lunch, and they put their swords on the side of the wall, and the bloodstains of the martyrs there are preserved behind glass there. It's very moving.
Wow, that is moving.
Yeah.
I will only add one more site. If you go to the Champs-Élysées by the Arc de Triomphe, you go down there, you will find the fanciest McDonald's in the world on the Champs-Élysées. It is very classy, and they give you breadsticks instead of French fries. Champs-Élysées, fanciest McDonald's you ever been in, I guarantee it.
Isn't that Champs-Élysées? I think my French is a lot better than yours.
Oh, that is quite possible.
Yeah, well, I learned
indeed.
I learned French from Peter Sellers movies.
Ah, yes.
Let's go to Claire in Ohio, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Claire, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, thank you, gentlemen.
Hi.
I have a question. Thank you for doing this topic, because I have a question. I have been struggling with this for a long time, and it's the Catholic Church's stance on illegal immigration.
Sure.
And I'm just going to make a few points and then see what your answer is. But, this is the most generous, welcoming country in the world. However, I feel like if we don't take care of our own people, and there's no doubt that we are not taking care of our own people, because you just have to look around at the homeless and the drug addicted and the veterans that are in bad shape, then we can't be strong for anybody else. And these people that have come in droves, there has been no chance to vet most of these people, and I understand that some people are fleeing persecution.
Are you referring to people who go through the legal process of immigrating to the country, or those who come here apart from the legal process and would be illegal immigrants?
Illegal, the ones that jump the fence.
Okay.
as opposed to those who are trying to come in the legal way and spending years and thousands of dollars because they're trying to do it the right way.
Claire, I'm gonna let Trent help unpack exactly what it is the church does and does not teach about immigration, illegal or otherwise.
Right, and I think the best place for you to go would be paragraph 2241 of the Catechism. It summarizes it very well there. It says, the more prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent they are able, to welcome the foreigner in search of the security and the means of livelihood which he cannot find in his country of origin. Public authorities should see to it that the natural right is respected that places a guest under the protection of those who receive him. And so what that would mean for those of us living here in the United States is that we believe that there is as Catholics, we believe there is a general right to allow people who seek migration for us to welcome them. A country should welcome them. Notice the Catechism says to the extent they are able. So the point that you raised, Claire, about, what if a country can't, quote unquote, take care of its own, that would be a prudential judgment. That doesn't contradict what the church teaches. People may disagree about the precise number of immigrants every year that a country is capable of assimilating. But I think everyone agrees on that principle. And the church agrees that that there could be a case where a nation is unable to, especially a very small nation, may not be able to welcome nearby as many refugees from a large crisis or something like that. So other members of the international community may need to help. So I think that's fine. When it comes to, especially to legal immigration, it says political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions. Immigrants are obliged to respect with gratitude the material and spiritual heritage of the country that receives them, to obey its laws and assist in carrying civic burdens. So what the church teaches is there is a right to migrate. A state can limit that right in accord with the common good. Immigrants must respect the laws of their country, including the laws that prohibit illegal immigration. But if someone engages in illegal immigration, that does not give license to treat them as being subhuman or to unlawfully oppress or exploit them. So, for example, a company would not have a right to coerce an illegal immigrant to work at a job that is highly dangerous or exploitative, knowing that the person is afraid that they will be deported. That would be wrong. So we have these elements together. There has to be a respect for the rule of law when it comes to immigration. The state can regulate immigration when it comes to promoting the common good, but immigrants, whether legal or illegal, have to be treated with respect in accordance with what civilized society and what the gospel requires. So you have all of that. I think your concerns fall within what the church teaches. Catholics are going to disagree about how to apply that in certain cases, but that's not the same as the teaching itself in paragraph 2241 of the Catechism.
Claire, if you stay on the line and give your mailing address to Marie, I'm going to send you a copy of our brand new 20 answers written by our friend Mark Brumley on Catholic social teaching. And there's a section in there giving a similar clear answer to the one that Trent did on what the church does and does not teach on immigration, which is a controversial topic, but the church's teaching on it is clear. Trent, let's even get one more. Let's go to Dan in Pennsylvania watching on YouTube. Dan, thanks for watching on YouTube. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hey, Chris and Trent.
Hello.
Hey, Chris and Trent. How's it going?
Good.
Dan, you got to be real quick.
My question is kind of related to IVF.
Sure.
As much as I agree with the Catholic teaching on it, I have tons of Catholic friends and non-Catholic friends who don't, and usually the argument I get from them is that, usually that they'll always say that it's always because IVF obviously isn't 100%, that they always say that when it works, it is always God's will within it. But I always look at that and kind of look at it a little differently, but I never know the exact argument to give.
Yeah, sure. So there's, to be brief before we run out of time here, one harm related to IVF is that many embryos are destroyed in the process. That's murder. That's a secondary wrong to IVF. The primary wrong is that it violates a child's right to life often, but it also violates a child's right to be conceived within the body of his mother. And that is the key thing here. A child has a right to be the fruit of the gift of self in the marital act, not as something created in a laboratory by a technician. And so you can point out that if we can create a child in a laboratory, why not just create children from all kinds of sperm and egg for people to, not just for any couple, but just for single parents. The child quickly turns into a commodity rather than as a gift of the spouses. And we see this, it's ugly in the IVF industry, how children are commodified in this way. I cover this in my book, Made This Way, that I highly recommend. 3 chapters on it in Made This Way if you're interested.
Dan, thanks very much for your call. Trent, thanks very much for your answers and for the convivial 2 hours.
Oh, it was great. Thank you for hosting, Chris.
I love hosting this show. Coming up in 22 hours, 2 hours of open forum with Tim Staples, Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers. Keep us in your prayers. See you tomorrow. God bless.